Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channels. I'm at McDuff Lives 2 this week as a result of some YouTube strikes. Also on Facebook at McDuff. And all the folks at Facebook, I say, welcome to you. Oh my goodness, I've been rushing around this morning getting things ready for a bit of a vacation and didn't even button my shirt. Well, how are you? I'm here to just be grateful for you guys, each of you who follows me and has joined me this morning. I'm really grateful to have you. I work hard to try to uncover the real history of my family as well as the history of our country and the history that is not taught in schools that is so essential for us to understand. And the big theme for me of this week and of my studies, to summarize it, is this: that ever since about 1850, 1860, the banking interests of the old world have been organizing a narrative, a fake news story that supports the continuation of their economic dominance of civilization. I've been studying Irish history in particular, and one of the things that really struck out at me yesterday, as my wife and I were watching a documentary called Miseire, um, Miseire, two words, Miseire, I should say, and the story of Ireland, and it's old black and white footage, but what you see is amazing. You see thousands and thousands of Irish people marching together, at a funeral for one of their leaders, for instance. But then you see something awful, and that is even more Irishmen marching together, joining the British Army to go off and fight in someone else's war and die and be killed there. And as we're watching it, we thought, well, how did they get all of these Irish people to go fight for the British Army in France and die, and the answer is propaganda. It's all propaganda. And it's all that propaganda is created to support the narrative. And the narrative is what? That, you know, Britannia rules the waves. Britannia is the good guys. Britannia is the vanguard of civilization. And so the best thing you an Irishman can do is to join the British Army because then you'll be at the vanguard too. Well, you're going to be at the vanguard of a bayonet poking in your chest. But that's part of the overarching sadness of the Irish story is without a good, strong, solid education in history, that the young people are so vulnerable to getting swept up by propaganda. And isn't it that, to see that didn't start, in 1980, or it didn't start with Reagan, or it didn't start with Dulles, and it didn't start with Walter Lippmann, didn't start with Edward Bernays, it didn't start with Freud. Where did it start? Well, it started with the manipulation of young people to induce them to go to war. And from that knowledge that they could actually get people to do something so against their interest as to leave their own home, leave their own country, go fight in somebody else's war, and be willing to die for that foreign flag. That is an incredible power to wield if you pick it up and wield it. And that's what they've done. So now they've got everybody bamboozled. And as William Casey, former head of CIA, said, we'll know our program is successful when everything the American people believe is a lie. So these professional liars and storytellers, propagandists, are the real murderers, the murderers of youth and the murderers of our hopes and dreams for a peaceful and prosperous future. Oh, I know what I want to do. Hang on a second. Mention was made yesterday of Corky Goss's artwork that he made for me, and I really wanted to share it with you. So here, have a look. Sorry about that light. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Well, the detail in the drawing is really astonishing, and you can see that that's George Webb in the front, and in the upper left there is myself playing the fiddle, and Professor Hamamoto, and this is an image that has lots and lots of intricate details. I guess that's me again down at the bottom with, or maybe that's no, that's my dad. That's my dad down there, isn't it, Corky? And yeah, so the chessboard, the Masonic symbols, the flag in the background, the Capitol, all the books, and the books are, that's the McDuff Memorial Library there. So I'm sorry this doesn't come across too well as I try to show it in front of that unfortunate light, but you can see that it is quite a piece of art indeed. And I'm really grateful for it. And yeah, I have it in the other room, but I appreciate you reminding me that, hey, I hadn't shown it on the show yet. So there you go, Corky, and thank you. Thanks a million for that. Great to meet you personally, and your contribution to the chat room is always much appreciated. Britannia Schmidtania, he says. Okay. Informed Anglophile. Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, it is. It is a great piece of art. Capitol building. Yeah, and all the craziness there. Did you see um did you see that Alex Jones got hit for $4 million by the jury? $4.1 million verdict against Alex Jones for, I guess, slander or something in connection with the Sandy Hook matter. Well, that's a lot of money. Um, I don't think Alex Jones is going to be able to just toss around $4 million and keep going. That's going to be a big problem for him. And I hadn't followed that trial, but as I looked into it in the back, as a yeah, appeal time is right, but you're not gonna get past it because this is the problem that I can see is, just from my point of view, having been through the legal system for well over 30 years. It is a default judgment. Now, how do you get a default judgment? Well, what happened to Alex Jones was that he neglected to file things in court that the court ordered him to file. And after a while, if you don't do what you're told, you do get punished. And the punishment is that a judgment was entered against him, sub- subject to determination of the amount of the judgment by a jury. That's terrible. That was a terrible thing. I mean, Alex Jones, if you had lawyers, they ought to be hiding their heads in shame for not responding to the court orders. And yeah, it's astonishing that that Alex Jones, who puts himself out there as a uh, fearless truth teller, has apparently clammed up and backed down from his original positions on Sandy Hook. And I was a person that was following it very closely for the first 3 or 4 years. This morning, I tried to see if there was any hint left of a YouTube reporter who went by the name of Barry Soetoro, just spoofing the name, but he did some really incisive videos on the subject. Well, nobody wants to talk about it anymore. Everybody assumes that, all the controversy is past and it really did happen, and all the suspiciousness of it is now being let go. But no, um, this I think is an indication that everybody has a price, you know, whether it's, a threat to your family, threat to you, a blackmail to expose some dirty movies you were unwittingly in one day, um, a uh, just an overwhelming ability to scare the living daylights out of you. That's what I think is going on here. Is that there is sufficient power behind these folks to shut anybody up. I mean, look what happened when I try to ask people about my dad. Mm. I'll tell you this story about General Leroy Manor, in that context. Um, as as those of you who have read my book or know my father's story know, that General Leroy Manor was his last boss at SACSA in the Pentagon. And when my dad passed away on June the 6th of 1971, General Manor was actually in the Philippines, because at that time he was also an officer of the Nugan Hand Bank. He was like the Manila office of the Nugan Hand Bank. So he's deeply involved in what's going on with this money laundering from the Golden Triangle and the heroin deals and everything. He knows all about it. He's got to. But he was a nice man, and he at the funeral for my dad, he came up to us. Was the only person that spoke to us. As I was 17, um, and my sister's younger than me, my mother. And nobody, there was a number of military people there, and people that knew my dad from all around the world were there, but none of them knew us. General Manor flew in from the Philippines for the funeral, and after the funeral, he approached us, and I remember he had on a seersucker suit from being in the tropics, and he said something apologizing for that. Um, but clearly, he had made a big effort to come to the funeral for my father, and we appreciate that. And He said to us, your father was a great man. And and then he kind of shook his head and said, that's all I can tell you. That's all we can tell you. Well, 50 years go by, and I learned from Doug Valentine more about my dad's story than I had ever known before. And I said, well, what about General Manor? He's still alive. And Doug said, well, write him a letter. Write him a letter telling him, who you are, and ask him if you can talk to him, and send him a self-addressed stamped envelope along with the note so that he can get back to you easily. This was, Doug's method of how he got people to talk to him. So the best chance I had was to go ahead and do that. And I wrote the letter and I sent it to General Manor in his home in Florida, and got no response whatsoever. Um, and then a few months later, I don't know, somewhere within a year later, General Manor died. Now he was old. He was 98 or 99 years old or so. He hadn't made it to 100 yet, which I thought maybe they had, given him one of those deals where you can live to 100 if you go along with this. But did did he was his departure advanced somewhat because I had contacted him? These powers behind the scenes are incredibly powerful and incredibly frightening if you let yourself be frightened. But just like my dad, you just have to keep going and do the right thing. And when you have an opportunity to clean up some of it, you clean it up. You see dust on the floor, you get a dustpan, you sweep it up. If you see dust in the history, then you try to clean it up too. And as I try to expose the horror that our country's been through, it's it's so amazing to see the role that my dad was in that horrible history. Um, yeah, I have a copy of it at hand. Oh well. Anyway, you guys know what the book looks like, and that's Oh, the other thing I wanted to let you know about is that I'm going to do a book launch in Ennis, which is the capital of County Clare, and it'll be at the Clare Museum, which is a very important museum in Ireland, in Ennis, and it will be well 4 o'clock their time on August 11th. So add 5 or 6 hours to that, and no, subtract. Yeah, that's right. So it's more like 11 a.m. here. So who knows? Maybe I'll be able to broadcast the event. But wow, am I grateful for that? One of my old Irish clan friends from way back, Edward O'Loughlin, has been kind enough to set up this wonderful, wonderful book launch for me on August the 11th. So okay, that's our plans, and as much as I can, I'll keep you guys in the loop as I travel, but probably not a whole lot will you see from me next week just because of our logistical moving around. Let me scroll back through the chat and see what you guys have on your minds. Top of the eek to you. Yeah. Good morning, handsome. I don't know who he's talking to. Who are you talking to, Mark? You're talking to Corky, no doubt. Um, yeah. B-22 Osprey. Corky, your comment here, I'll put that up on the screen. The Dublin interview on the lack of historical awareness indicates volumes, but I can't quite articulate it. What it is, they're just snowing everybody with their narrative. But it really spoke a lot to me to think that the only plaque that they put up was in 1966, and the plaque was not about how brave or courageous uh, the rebels were. It was about the surrender of the rebels. Like, here is the place where the rebels surrendered. Well, if Britain was still governing Ireland, that would make sense because you'd be happy that you got rid of your rebels. But Britain's gone now, and you have Ireland is a free country, supposedly. But then what is it but the narrative? The same thing, that blanket of falsehood that comes from the media, or through the media, comes from the elites and the bankers through the media to keep us all in a trance based upon false history and real threats. And that, we're getting closer and closer to true totalitarianism. These battles that we fight, we're on the front lines. You're on the front lines in your neighborhood, in your kid's school, and the cost of losing is horrific because then all the history will disappear. All the heroism of people standing up against the bullies. No, the bullies will turn into the good guys. And everybody will think, wow, Thomas Malthus was the greatest thinker ever, and Adam Smith was the greatest economist ever. And yes, that's what we should do, is continue with this incredible uh, uh, fractional reserve banking. What does fractional reserve banking mean now that there's really not any reserves anyway? It's all just funny money. But they've gotten to this point, you know, through their narrative, through fooling us. Ireland is a tax haven. I imagine it is. I think there's a lot of corruption in the upper reaches of the Irish government. Sad to say, just in my opinion. I don't have personal knowledge, just the way I feel about it. I can express my opinion without having to be right all the time. I'd love to be wrong. Maybe they're all a bunch of really good, honest people. Yeah, I never say never. Who knows? The Thursday night trio might come back one day. Michael Panzer, Edgar Allan Poe was a fake death. I never thought of that. Um, if you can give me anything to study on that, I'd be fascinated to learn that that was a fake death. I don't know much about Poe, and the people at Schiller, they really worship him like he's the greatest poet of the 19th century, and he might be. Something kind of about, you know, quoth the raven nevermore. It puts me off. It's like, seems a little contrived, but then I haven't really studied him. The plaque was in 1966, Robert, but I don't know the month. Give the bullies an offer they can't refuse. All right. All right. And what would that look like? Well, to me, it looks like a huge body of people, you know, aware of the horrors of the past and confronting them and saying, look, for each one of you, there's a million of us. And we're going to take you down unless you want to start playing nice. This concentration of wealth in BlackRock and Vanguard ought to scare everybody. Oh, no, you're not going to convince me that Rush Limbaugh was Jim Morrison. No, no, no. Don't. Come on. I can believe that Jim Morrison fakes the death. That makes sense to me. but, but he's not Rush Limbaugh. Oh, please, please help me. Oh, who's the same person now? Bill Hicks? Oh, resiste. Yeah, yep, resist. You know, I follow Sean Ross, the Gure channel, and his ancestry is Huguenot or Huguenot, and they were from they went. As I understand, if I recall, his ancestors' journey from France to the Netherlands when the Edict of Nantes expelled the Huguenots, and then from the Netherlands to the Cape Colony, the Dutch Cape Colony, where they became the Boers, and then the Boer War is actually part of Irish history in that just like World War One, but you know, a generation earlier, the Irish soldiers filled the ranks of the British Army, and the British Army then went down to South Africa and defeated the Boers. And so it was the British against the Huguenot descendants, the Boer Dutch settlers and their descendants. And it was a brutal campaign which resulted in the first real concentration camps. Because that's what they did. The British set up concentration camps for the Huguenots, for the Dutch people, and that to me is kind of jaw dropping. That here's these British are generally Protestants, right? The Dutch are generally Protestants, Lutherans, or uh, the church, the Kirk, a Calvinist society that is not that different from British, and yet they were willing to do the concentration camp thing on their prisoners, and families, men, women, children, and people were abused and starved and tortured and murdered. And so it's not so much. What's stunning to me is this British financial system will do it to anybody, right? If they'll do it to them, they'll do it to us. They'll throw us in concentration camps in this country, in America. They will round us up and they will use us as experimental guinea pigs, which I believe if you look into it, you'll find that was probably also done in those concentration camps in South Africa, the Cape Colony. And that's where uh, what's his name's kindergarten was. Milner's kindergarten. And the guy, he just gathers young African boys for his pleasure and amusement and entertainment. And this is the great financial system of the world that is so great that it can exploit children and not feel badly about it whatsoever. And think about that, those crazy doctors that were giving people adrenaline and incredibly huge doses and LSD and things up at McGill in Canada and elsewhere, just doing things to treat them as if they were nothing but an experimental guinea pig on which they were allowed to do anything. Now that dehumanized brain, these people have taken themselves out of humanity and created their own species, which is an exploitative and narcissistic mind. And they've built some kind of mental defenses against anything good. That is the theme of McDuff Lives, my book. Where's a copy of it? That statement at the beginning of the book that I quoted from, sorry, I don't have it at hand, Bertrand Russell. But the gist of what Bertrand Russell says is that we are only accepting certain people into our world, into our, you know, elite superhuman order. And, unless you're already with one of us great families like the Russell family, the Russell Trust, the Skull and Bones opium people, unless you're, one of us great, great people, then you must be kept ignorant. And that's why they have a narrative. And if you are of a particularly attractive, intelligent, strong uh, character or physique or whatever, and they decide, well, this person might be good to bring into our elite status to, kind of broaden the gene pool, for instance, if they feel like they're getting too inbred. And they would pick somebody like my father and say, hey, guess what? You're going to get a full scholarship to Loomis. How do you feel about that? And this guy's in eighth grade. He's like, I'll do whatever you tell me. So he goes to Loomis, and then he gets a full boat scholarship to Harvard. And then they start, kind of grooming him into being one of them. But he's not going to do it. He will not do it. He knows both sides. He grew up in the lace curtain O'Loughlin family, but his mother was on the other side of the tracks with the less fortunate Irish, the immigrants that didn't have, the leg up, whatever leg up was given to the O'Loughlins as they tried to reach into the upper reaches of Connecticut WASP society. It's a losing game. They want you to try, they want you to come in, but then the kicker is if you prove that you're still sympathetic to the common people and not willing to do exactly as we say, even no matter how bad it is, if you're not willing to do that, then we're going to have to kill you. And that is the story of my dad's life. If you read my book, you'll see what happened was that, for some reason, his family was in line for this honor to actually have my dad advanced into their elite world, where he would be a white shoe lawyer for Sullivan and Cromwell, for instance, and do the bidding of the big money, you know, taking down neighborhoods, taking down Latin American countries, taking down other people's accomplishments in order to bring it all into the great stream of totalitarian fascist economy. So they put the spell on us. But the spell's not working, is it? Canada also had camps. We had German camps and Japanese camps. Yeah, okay. So that but and we had Germans here in Maryland. Andrews Air Force Base, the famous Air Force base just outside of Washington, was in fact a German internment camp during the war. And they used to take the soldiers out into the fields and let them do the field work uh, here in Southern Maryland. I know people that knew some of those German soldiers. Interesting sidelight, but I don't think there was the kind of mistreatment here in America that people got at the hands of the British. And of course, that the Boer War was back in the 1890s, so this was a long time before World War II. It's cited as the first example of concentration camps by some people. Mr. Schickelgruber, he faked his death. Okay. I would love it if I could believe for sure, that Hitler survived and was in Argentina and had, there was some interviews with some old German service people. I mean, like waiters and waitresses and a waitress in Argentina saying, "Oh yeah, I was his waitress. I knew him well, and he lived here in this certain area." And I'd like to believe it, but how do you know, that to the depths to which they will go to set up a false narrative? I like I said, I said Sandy Hook a little earlier in the show, and as Corky says, be careful. They will really zap you if you say that. I didn't say anything about it. I just said, I followed a certain reporter on it years ago, but you can't find him anymore. He's been disappeared. Well, that's the way they work. I'm not saying he's right either. I'm just saying he was pretty incisive in his reporting. All right, what else you guys got? Fish and chips, James Bond movies, Jaguar. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Beatles, Tavistock. It's a shame about the Beatles, isn't it? I mean, nobody wants to know. Nobody wants to be told that their idols are clay, had feet of clay. And my feeling is, yeah, they're great musicians. Lennon uh, and McCartney, Harrison, and even Ringo, deserve a lot of credit as musicians. Hey, Ringo wrote some songs and uh, and good singer too. But there's no doubt that it was contrived from Tavistock uh, beginnings, and the production values that came along with Brian, what's his name? That's all. That's packed in. That amount of musicianship with the studios and the incredible abilities of their studio producers um, is an indication to me that this was not just a garage band takeoff group. These guys had a lot of help once they were selected, to be the spokesman of, the good rock and roll. You had them for the good rock and roll, and then you had the Rolling Stones for the bad rock and roll. And what are the Rolling Stones doing but talking about brown sugar and all of this, you know, the attraction of the dark side, seducing people to accept satanic, you know, satanic forces in our lives. One of my I have a lot of LPs. One of them is at their satanic majesty's request. Well, how much more obvious can you get? The Rolling Stones are making albums, writing songs to fill out the agenda of the dark side of the music industry, to support hard drug use and the excess of everything, and then a lot of death. Celebrating death. Painted Black. I was in high school when Painted Black came out. It's a great, catchy song, but it's all about, somebody dying and dark stuff, very dark. Beatles gave us the bright side. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be, let it be. What is that message? Let it be. That means don't do anything, you know. Let that stranger get beat up in front of your face, and don't do anything. Don't intervene. Just be a consumer, not an active human being. And so we did. We tuned in, dropped out, turned on and dropped, tune in, turn on, drop out. And most of us did, whether we did the drugs or not, we did kind of just disassociate ourselves from what was going on. I couldn't figure out why we had to go to Vietnam and bomb, you know, villagers. And had no idea why we had to do that. Why are we doing it? Well, at the same time, my dad was working at the Pentagon. So what am I going to do? I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the right questions. Yeah, they give us theatrics instead of facts because they can't handle the truth. All right, what you guys talking about? Yeah, Lord Kitchener and Churchill. That's right. Yeah, speaking of Bill Gates, he is now the largest owner of farmland in the United States. Congratulations, Bill Gates. I hope you have lots of fun poisoning everybody with GMO crap. It's going to really make you happy, isn't it? Over a million. Let's do this one from Prester John. Over 1 million Black World War II veterans were denied their GI Bill benefits following the war. Benefits that totaled into the billion in lost wealth that has not been offered to this day. I don't know. That might well be true. Um, was there GI benefits from uh, oh, I'm sorry, World War II. For some reason I was thinking of World War One. World War II benefit were denied their benefits. I would have to look into that. That's shocking to me. Um, Interesting story. I don't know any more about it than that, but thank you for sharing it. Yeah, yeah, death cult. This is what they're doing. They're building this death cult. Have you ever seen? Of course you have. Uh, the uh, the Dia del Muerte skulls. The Mexican skulls. They became kind of a cult art form, and they make these things in like 3D now. There's little models of these guys, and they're skulls. It's just like the skull on the Totenkopf on the head of the German SS guys. They're skulls, and they become so famous that it was a Jeopardy question on Jeopardy last night. Uh, they showed you a picture of it. What is this? Well, you have to know what it is. It's called a sugar skull. It's made out of sugar, I guess. Well, this is all celebrating, taking what was a religious concept of honoring the ancestors by a Mexican culture, and then appropriating it and just putting it all everywhere. I mean, you can't even go into a Mexican restaurant, it seems like, without seeing these things on the wall. And it creeps me out. I don't like to have skulls looking at me from all over the place. But that's what they're doing. They're imposing this idea of, hey, death is everywhere, and let's just, make fun of it, worshiping death. Tyro Fusion, I agree with you. I didn't follow it up until about this past week, and then I thought, oh my, well, actually, it was John Rappaport that said on Twitter. He said, you know, isn't this a First Amendment issue? This is a free speech issue. Come on, we need to raise consciousness. Look what's happened to Alex Jones. And I thought, well, why would it be a free speech issue? Let me look into it. And I looked into it, unfortunately, I had to admit, well, no, Alex Jones, he screwed up. And what could he have done? He could have filed motions to relieve the default, to reinstate the lawsuit. He apparently didn't do anything. And the only way I can explain that is that he has been scared. He's been frightened. He's been compromised. And that's where I started the show today. There is a point for everybody where if you don't shut up, horrible, horrible things are going to happen to you or your family. Well, I have a lot more to say before I shut up. I'm going to keep talking as long as I can because I want everybody to benefit from what happened to my family, to my dad. I don't want any of this to be buried under their avalanche of false narratives and propaganda. Uh, now's the time. Get up, stand up. Don't give up your rights. Get up, stand up. And do what you can to help others who can't see yet through the BS. We see through a lot of it. We see through most of it. learning how to help others see it. And that's difficult. We try to different methods. You can't yell at them. You can't beat them until they understand. So you have to be subtle. You have to give them, you know, what appears to be an interesting question, a bit of irony. Why do you think this happened? And then let them think it through and respond to you. But yeah, everybody has a price. Godfather quote, you are right, Harry. And perhaps I'll let that be the last word for today. All right. I do not know when I will talk to you next, but I am looking forward to it. And everybody here in the chat room, understand that you mean a lot to me. And you know, as we as we do this together, even though we're across many, many, many miles, there's something that connects us. Uh, and I feel it, and I hope you do too. All right. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and thank you again.